Hello, you are very welcome to a special episode of the Overlap Rugby podcast. I'm Daragh, this is Shane.
Hello.
This is not a full show, this is really just a continuation of last week's show. We're not going to be looking back on any of the Lions stuff. Obviously they had that great win over the Lions as it was. They will also be playing the Sharks on Wednesday. We're going to sort of hedge our bets and hope that the Sharks don't pull off a shock, although they might, against the Lions. That will be a good game, but if you're looking for any of that Lions stuff, we'll have a full show sort of reflecting on the two Lions games, also all of the other summer tests where the USA did themselves no discredit, and all of those other games. We'll have that up for you on Thursday, so keep an eye out for it then. We'll also be previewing all the Lions Bulls games, but for now what we're looking at is a very, very exciting test series. A series that people have been sleeping on between Australia and France, which kicks off this Wednesday. It's a 11 a.m. kickoff our time in the UK. It's an 8 p.m. local kickoff on Wednesday evening. And this is going to be a 3-test tour in Australia. The French going over there. It's the first game now between North and South that we've had really since the beginning of the pandemic, since the World Cup. A big northern team against a big southern team. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to dig into it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, excited for this one. As you said, it starts this Wednesday. Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane. They had to move it. Initially, it was going to be, I think, not Amy Park. It was, I think, it
might have been Melbourne,
Sydney.
was it?
No,
or was it
Sydney.
Okay.
They had to move that for COVID reasons, so they're going to base camp to Suncorp. As you said, those kickoff times. We have Paul Williams of New Zealand, who's going to be the man in the middle. And if you want to watch it, it's going to be Sky Sports here in our neck of the woods is where we're broadcasting it, or Stan Sports in Australia locally. I think Canal Plus have it in France as well, and then it might be Super Sport in South Africa, somewhere like that.
Usually reliable.
All available, but definitely worth watching because it's an exciting kind of clash between two very, very exciting fledgling young teams on the international scene. As you said, it's North v South, but they're also branding it as Vive la Renaissance. Vive la Renaissance, which I can totally get on board with. It's an exciting...
It's applicable for both, really. It is the Vive la Renaissance tour. It is both of these teams really have been, by their own high standards, you could say, in the rugby wilderness for much of the last decade. I know Australia made a World Cup final in 2015. France obviously made one in 2011, but in the interim years, these teams, World Cup finalists by tradition, winners by tradition. Australia obviously winning 2 World Cups. They haven't been at those heights. They've been kind of at sea. I think it probably started, if you're looking at an Australian downward trajectory, you probably start with that 2013 Lions tour was real low for them. I didn't think they played very well, and they had that renaissance in 2015, which was short-lived. They've struggled since. They've fallen behind the All Blacks considerably. They've fallen behind the Springboks now as well. But in the last year, there have been considerable green shoots. They've managed to have this young squad, this young exciting squad, and they've had a wonderful season of a wonderful 2 seasons of domestic rugby where they've been able to really get a look at some classy, talented players. And I think their test form last year, winning one against the All Blacks, drawing another, there's definite positive vibes coming out of Australia at the moment.
Truly.
And likewise France.
Yeah, the same thing. France have been kind of the nearly men for the last couple of years, finishing agonisingly second in Six Nations and Autumn Nations Cup and most things that they're entering in, but now fresh off an all-French final in the European Cup, which was won by Toulouse, and Toulouse then obviously doing the double. Some of those players not available in this, but a lot of young talent coming in this squad. The last time they did that in the Autumn Nations Cup final, they were saying it's a B team, you're writing them off, and they turn up in Twickenham and damn near win the thing. Probably should have won the thing. So they have a lot of exciting youth that they've brought over here as well. And I'm just excited to see how they take the field and how they look in terms of cohesion. There is a bit of chopping and changing from both. There are not everyone available for both teams as well, but just we're going to follow on from 2 pretty successful seasons for both, and just going into summer with a lot to prove and a lot to gain from this
I
tour.
would think so. I think for France certainly, this represents a real opportunity for a few things. I mean, you touched on the fact that they obviously had that win, which I think was important from Toulouse point of view. They had the all French final in Europe, and they did have a French winner of that, and it was Toulouse, where a lot of that young talent really comes from. That was important. But notably internationally, despite being, headline grabbing, entertainment, magnificent to watch, really promising, highly rated all over the world, much touted, much spoken of. They have put together, I think, 3 consecutive second place finishes now in tournaments, the Six Nations both this year and last year, and the Autumn Nations Cup in the interim, where they just couldn't get a bit of silverware. And so that will be, I keep bringing that up, but that will be eating away at them a little bit. I think it's important on the step, if they really are plotting their course to the top of the world, that they claim some silverware along the way. And I think an away series victory in Australia would be massive. It would be colossal.
Huge,
It would be a real thing to chalk off. And it's also a great barometer for where they are as well, because this Aussie team is very, very good. But for France, that it's a massive opportunity for that. It's also an opportunity to just bring some new talent into the squad, to broaden the depth of players with international experience, which they've done quite a bit of. I think the depth of rugby in France is extremely strong. They have a huge player base, and there's a lot of talk about they're not having the full package, but this squad has a lot of quality in it, and they will be confident. Well, if not confident, then certainly quietly optimistic, maybe of being able to pull a shock off, or go out to Australia and win a series, which perhaps wouldn't be a shock.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. It would be a shock historically. It's not precedented. It's a very tough place to go and win a series, and France have struggled to do so there. But for Australia as well, this is a good litmus test for all of the same reasons. It's a young squad. There's a lot of the fledgling players. A lot of the guys were under 20s like a few years ago as well, so just the age profile of some of these guys and so of the whole team is just, it's relatively new. They have things to chalk off on their list, and hosting a team as respected as France are in the Southern Hemisphere like that for a 3-test series, pretty condensed test series, is going to test their depth as well, because although France have picked something of a development squad, they kind of have the means to do that. As you were saying, their depth is just off the charts. With the Wallabies, what they found is like a good crop of young players, but probably closer to around a 23 or so of it. It's certainly not quite a full 30-odd man squad. They do have their first squad available.
Especially
a lot
with
of
injuries, and you can talk about injuries, but it was the same last year. It'll be the same next year, and it'll be the same in the World Cup. I mean, you're always going to have those few, and Australia do seem to be stretched somewhat thin when that happens. I do think as well for the Wallabies, like, as much as they're a young squad and they're a coming squad, like, I've got the impression sitting from far away that this is quite an important year for Australia. When you look at, like, there's plenty of people have enjoyed writing obituaries for rugby in Australia over the last number of years.
Trans-Tasman as well, subsequently.
Well, prior to that, I mean, it's been written many times over the last decade, not without merit. The sport's been struggling financially, it's been struggling for eyeballs, but I think Super Rugby AU are possibly the best thing to come out of COVID, maybe full stop on planet Earth. Has been a wonderful thing for them. It's brought back sort of some energy and impetus in terms of the Australian fans engaging with the sport, and to no small effect that was a result of the free-to-air TV, which has been massive as well. I think the stats have come out that they've had tremendous increase in eyeballs on the sport, but then Super Rugby Trans-Tasman doesn't go that well. There is a danger that if their test season doesn't go as well, that the eyeballs will drift. It's kind of the nature of sporting fandom in Australia.
Fickle stuff. It's a results-based industry. For the few years that they were completely at sea towards the tail end of the regular or the kind of old Super Rugby setup with all the 18 teams or so, when it got out to the biggest it was, those Australian franchises were really underperforming in that and getting hockey very often, and the crowds for the attendances were just dipping steadily, and it was so rare to see any kind of crowd or atmosphere at one of these Australian games, unless it was a derby of some kind. Sometimes there were some of those derbies, but then you look at the final of Super Rugby AU and it was a full crowd. It was at some
massive
club,
occasion.
It was a massive occasion, and we are set, I think, to have fans at this one as well. So that'll be exciting. Like, that's what you want to see, is just the big spectacle in Australia, and rugby being a draw. And they're an exciting young team, as we said. They play an exciting brand, as do France. There should be no issue marketing this series.
Exactly. That's the flip side of what I'm saying, is that it's a massive opportunity. It's a huge opportunity if the Wallabies do go well, if they can win a series here, bring some energy into that rugby championship, and then with the quality that they have, they can stay largely injury free, pull off a couple of results, who knows, and then all of a sudden it's back to being just a massive sport in the country, where you do have the potential for those occasions, like the game from the end of the earth at the turn of the century, which had something like 100,000 fans at it in Sydney, which is a far cry from what we're getting these days. So I think it's a massive opportunity, as well as everything else. Just to look at briefly just at the history of games between the two teams, there's just a curious pattern that sort of emerges. Home field advantage is massive, but what stood out to me just looking at the stats was that these two sides have played very rarely, just 47 games over a 100-year period.
Yeah, that's mad.
And they haven't faced each other since 2016, so 5 years without a France-Australia test, which is a shame. It's such a pretty game on paper,
indeed.
but it doesn't happen that often.
Yeah, that's a shame. I suppose you pine for the thing, the kind of, it's a rare thing, but it's a beautiful thing when it comes, I guess, is one way to flip that positively. But probably they should play more often, to be honest. We'll see how this one goes. But yeah, just in terms of their history then, Wallabies have the edge in terms of record. You said played 47 times. I think Wallabies have won 26 and France 18, and there have been 3 draws as well. So yeah, pretty close record. Wallabies just edging it. But the interesting one is the away form, because as you say, the home advantage just plays such a factor, and we know how strong the Wallabies are in Suncorp against any opposition. But in terms of France, they haven't won away in Australia since 1990, losing 11 games in that time. And their record in Brisbane specifically is 1-6. And that one, when did that one come? 72. So I don't think there's much that this young French team can mine experience-wise from that one. But it's been a while, in other words. And Brisbane, we know, is a fortress for Australia. So this first test certainly will be a toughie.
Yes, and it'll be interesting. 2 games now in Suncorp. The French very much backs to the walls in that regard. But in terms of their own optimism, their under-20s team, obviously they're such a young team themselves, has won the last 2 World Cups, including in 2019 beating the young Aussies in the final. Which is it's a positive final for both of these countries. It's a sign, I think, of the talent that's coming through in both, which I think is very real. There's that's something to mine maybe if you're France.
Well, certainly there are a few heads on this team that I know. Noah Lolosio, who's got the nod of 10, he was playing in that particular team, that under-20s team, as was the likes of Fraser McWright, Harry Wilson, Trevor Hosea, Lachlan Lonergan. So some current Wallabies have memories of losing that game to France, and certainly for the French side, a little bit of something to mine from, confidence wise.
A little bit of something is right. It is also a curious tour from a squad point of view, because this is an 11-day tour, 3 games in 11 days. 7th of July, Wednesday, Tuesday, then Saturday, over literally a 11-day period. Crazy stuff. And hence, I think both squads are going to come into play a lot. We do have the teams. We do we not for test one?
We do. I know just in terms of injuries, we know Nick White and James O'Connor, who are the incumbent halfbacks, are out injured. I think it's an MCL and a groin strain. So there are a few injuries precluding kind of these key guys' selection. And France, we know, have opted for kind of youth in their squad in general. They've rested a lot of the Toulouse guys, but mainly guys who are under quarantine anyway. But they've kind of just picked some experience, but a lot of young guys who are on the fringe with a mind to making a name for themselves and trying to force themselves into the jersey. So with that being said, we do have both teams. I suppose just rattle through both of them, starting with the hosts, which is Australia. We have James Slipper coming, the ever-present James Slipper. He's the immortal man for them at number 1. With Payanga Amosa at getting the nod at 2, and Alan Alalatoa getting the nod at 3. Rather somewhat surprisingly, but I kind of understand Tupou on the bench rather than starting at 3.
He'll have a big part to play in all 3 tests, Tupou, whether it's from the bench or to start. It's just a question of how you deploy him. Last year, they used him a lot off the bench, and to great effect. I mean, he got that winning try against the All Blacks. Very, very explosive off the bench. And we've seen the Reds on the flip side make him do 80-minute showing after 80-minute showing, and he has his qualities there as well, but perhaps his explosivity struggles a little, and I definitely think to have him to bring on off the bench against a tiring young French team could be a game changer because he's elite.
And then I think on the Tuesday test you could see that flipped, because actually Scott CEO picked up an injury last week and had to leave the squad, so I think it's going to be largely those two involved in terms of thing, because it's a young lad on the bench covering the loose head as well, I think, Angus Bell. So yeah, it's going to be looking for a lot of experience from those 2 experienced tight heads to try and lock down that set piece. And then the familiar faces of Matt Phillip and Salakai Aloto in the second rows. They were the incumbents. They were doing a great job for them last year in the Tri-Nations. And similarly, the back row is pretty experienced now.
Pretty exciting.
Valentini, Hooper, who's captain from 7, and Harry Wilson both mobile and physical. They can go all day.
We know the qualities of Hooper. Obviously, he's had some good success in Japan, but Valentini, very, very exciting, very physical. He could get stuck into those French. He's brilliant, and Harry Wilson is another one of those silky ball playing number 8s.
Yeah, but with a physical edge as well. He's a hardy book in the contact. They all kind of are, to be honest, to a man. This whole team are pretty able ball carriers, including at scrum half they opted for Jake Gordon. As I was saying, Nick White not available. Gordon was the guy on the bench last Tri-Nations. They've opted for him to start with Noah Lolosio at 10 in for James O'Connor. And then at 12 they have Matt Tamua with Hunter Paisami at 13. There was a bit of debate what to do. They have lots of options at centre. That's what they've opted for Test 1. With Cora Betty, their danger man, at 11. Tom Wright, also excellent from his form last year, in on the right wing, and Tom Banks at fullback as well. Pretty solid.
It's a nice backline. There's definitely intrigue in that centre jersey. The consensus over there was that Tamua at 12 was the way to go without James O'Connor.
That seems to be what they're thinking, like with combination of Gordon instead of they have on the bench Tate McDermott, who's had a fantastic season. There was some people calling for him to start, but I think what they've opted for is the experience, the international test experience of Gordon with Tamua, who they do have a lot of trust in, to kind of chaperone Lolosio. And I think Tamua's there also as 10 cover because Ikitau is actually on the bench, set to make his debut. Actually, there are a few debutants on the wing or on the bench. Lonergan at 16, Swain covering lock, Ikitau obviously at centre, and Andrew Kellaway, fresh from his Rebels season, is covering the back 3 as well. So 4 potential debutants off that bench.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get into the dynamics to do with that centre combination and whether the balance is quite right in the Aussie team. But we'll look at that in a bit more detail when we're just previewing the game itself. But to look at the flip side and look at the French team, obviously they're missing some men, but there is some test experience in there. Jean-Baptiste Gros starts at loose head, very familiar. Barlow gets a nod at hooker. Demba Bamba in a tight head. Garachi and Taufi Fanua make up a huge lock partnership.
Very physical.
Dylan Cretan, who's a tigerish force from blindside flank, who'll tackle you all day and is in flying form in terms of his international form. He's been brilliant, had a brilliant Six Nations. Jay Launch captains the side from 7, and he's been sort of in and out, and curious to see how he goes and how he functions as a leader. And then Makalu, who's an excitement machine, gets the nod at 8 as well, and it'll be fun to see him matching up against Harry Wilson, because that is very dynamic and very fun. In the back line they've gone for Kulu, who has a bit of experience at 9. Obviously Dupont is the man, but Kulu is kind of coming for Saran's backup shirt. He's a very good young scrum half.
They have a lot of good talent at scrum half, really. Like, I wouldn't fear for, like, they have around 6 or 7 scrum halves who I'd love to get into Leinster to sort of say, they really do. Like,
drive a nice tempo and run a good game and pass really well. Yeah, there's a lot to love about that. They have the inexperienced but much touted Louis Carbonell, who has had sort of a lukewarm start to his test career, in all honesty. But
he's been he's been consistently impressive at club level. He kind of keeps forcing himself into these kinds of tests with really good performances. But you're right, in the test windows or the test chances that he's been given, he's kind of been a bit underwhelming and kind of sitting pretty firmly in 3rd place after Jalibert and Ntamak, who kind of have that 10 jersey and 22 jersey relatively sewn up currently, but this is a chance for him to stake his claim. Yep,
absolutely. Jonathan Dante, who is plenty of test experience, and Arthur Vincent get the nod at centre, classy centres as well.
Good defenders.
And really solid wingers. Gavin Villiers, who came into the French side when they were last picking their changed outfit last autumn and lit it up.
He's fresh from he was playing with the 7s as well. He played in that game against Ireland at the Olympic qualifier. He nearly got to the Olympics. He probably wouldn't be playing in this had they won that, but he was straight back in, so he's fit and ready. We saw him
classy player. And Damien Pinot, we all know about on the right wing, sometimes issues defensively, but fantastic going forward. And Melvin Yamane gets the nod at fullback. He's the Perpignan flyer, who is top try scorer in the Pro 2, but interestingly has yet to play a top Couture's match.
Yes, indeed.
But so highly touted is he that he's in the test team starting.
Absolutely.
French cap before a top Couture's appearance. What about that?
That's pretty impressive. Yeah, we're going to thank Simon Delattre for his comment on just that, just saying, as a French fan, particularly excited about Chamonix's debut. He's 21-year-old fullback from Perpignan, He has a Pro 14 top try scorer this season, but hasn't played a single game in top 14 yet, or top 14 yet. Yeah, thank you for the comment, and yeah, excited to see that as well. Always excited to see a young French flyer, albeit from the Pro D, but the Pro D has some seriously high quality games, and if you're being top try scorer in that league, you're obviously pretty quick and well able to take a try, so Wallabies beware of that.
Yeah, there's another, the Perpignan side must be very highly rated because Quentin Walker, their loose head, is in on the bench as well. Plenty of inexperience on that bench, to be honest. Etrelard, very decent hooker, will slot in fine. Falatia coming in covering tight head is going to be interesting. Pesanti, I should say, Baptiste Pesanti is huge, another big lock. They do have very sort of a lot of muscle mass covering the lock position these days. Van Verberge, who I don't actually I'm not that familiar with. We haven't got a chance to watch that much Top 14 rugby, but anyway, he's been doing bits for Cast in this season, and obviously they had a great run towards the end of the year, but we didn't get to watch much of it. So I'll watch him with interest. And Cameron Wokey on the bench as well, so they've gone with the old 6-2 split. Wokey obviously huge good potential, classy
man off the bench as well, very dynamic, kind of just springy athlete, not dissimilar to Makalu, who starts in terms of just the athletic force that he presents, and he'll be good energy in the second half. And some really good experience. It is a 6-2 split, but the backs are Teddy Iribarren from Racing, really experienced scrum half, and Anthony Boutier as well, who you were calling to get in all season long. His big exit boot will be pretty formidable for the Aussies to deal with, and it's an important part for France as well, is to just try and manage themselves around the pitch a bit better, because they're playing an awful lot, like a lot of rugby with minimal possession and territory in the Six Nations, and it kind of ultimately cost them because they fell just short of where they want to be.
No, it's true. It's absolutely true. And I wouldn't have mind seeing Boutier start. Obviously, I feel like they need to get him in to solve that problem. But given the fullback jersey to a debutant try scoring machine is a lovely statement of intent.
I really do like what this
selection that one hopes would work out for them.
Indeed. That being said, it's one that the Aussies will be targeting. It's like, what's this? Never played any Top Tours games? We'll kick at him. Maybe that could go one of two ways. If he drops a few balls and gets on top of the young lad, but if he runs one back for a counter-attacking try,
that's it. And you do have Boutier to bring on if things go bad for him. So decent balance, and I do like the call. Looking ahead, just broadly speaking, having looked at the squads and sort of the overall colour of the series, in terms of the game itself and what each side will be looking to do, it's interesting. Obviously, first hit out for us, for the Wallabies, but we'll start with them. They are hosting the game. Like Dave Rennie has been talking up a storm about the ferocity that they need to be bringing on defence, the physicality that they had in the contact. Like, people forget the Wallabies, they are a fun team to watch. They do try and move the ball. They tried more than Argentina or the All Blacks in that competition last year. But it was a very defensive competition. It was a very physical competition. And for much of last year, it was sort of the boot of JOC, the boot of Banks, and the physicality of sort of the back row, the tackling, being as stingy as their opponents were in terms of giving up scores. And I definitely think defence is a point of emphasis, especially against a razzle-dazzle French team.
Yes, indeed. So that'll be a big test of those centres as well, because obviously they've opted for kind of dual playmaker thing. So Paisami at the 13 channel will be involved in that defensive thing, but likewise the back row. I also think the scrum will be key. They've obviously opted for that Ala Alatoa to start, and obviously try and lock that down for 30 minutes or for 30 to 50 minutes depending on how much you want to get out of him, and then launch Tupou off the bench to finish the game. I like the idea. I can see the wisdom in it.
Well, when you look at that French bench, and I know we were talking about Iribarren and Boutier as potential good impact for them, but in terms of the pack outside of Wokey really and Etrelard maybe, like, there's not a huge amount of more quality replacing what's on the pitch, if that makes sense. That's not no disrespect to the lads, and someone could come on and light it up, but I feel like they've gone with their starters in the pack are their best players in the pack. And so for if you're an Aussie team and you're looking at like a debutant loose head coming on off the bench for France, meanwhile you're unleashing arguably the best tight head in the world, or at least one of. It's that trifecta of him, Furlong and Malherbe, I would say, are the three. But to launch Tupou in and get on top potentially at scrum time, it could be decisive, especially if the game is playing out slow and kick oriented and not much is happening.
1 score, 2 score.
If Tupou comes on, that could be it.
That can be a game breaker. He has been all season. When he comes on, will he be able to dominate to the extent that we've seen him do at the club game? It is obviously international footy, remains to be seen. I expect he will be giving that Perpignan loose head a bit of a hard time if scrums do happen happen in the final quarter. That's just my 2 cents on that. But
Totally,
also we made mention of Salakai Loto and Philip being quite an experienced partnership for them now. It got kind of bedded in over that Tri Nations and Bledisloe Cup series last year, and found themselves being quite an able lock partnership. I know I had my doubts about Salakai Loto a couple of seasons ago as a lock because I think he's a bit slight. He is still more of a rangy type than the kind of enforcer, but I think Philip does a lot of that hard work. Then they actually now have a bit of balance, and couple that with, I think Salakai Loto has bulked up a little bit in the 12 months since. I think he's a stronger man now than he was. And I think they're quite an able pairing. I think ultimately, if it was chips were down and if it's World Cup, and I know they're musing on it, I think guys like Skelton could come into this squad in the future and bolster that particular area, but that's not a factor for this one. These two guys have the jerseys and they've been doing a great job with them.
Yeah, no question. I think Skelton, there's always going to be room for a guy like Skelton, but I think Philip has been outstanding, and if he can keep that last season form going in terms of his Wallaby performances, you wouldn't have much to worry about. He's an absolute workhorse. In terms of how they use the ball, like the Wallabies, obviously traditionally, lot of screen plays, huge width, try and spread the field, and it's interesting. They have the dual playmakers on the pitch, but I think they do have to be ready for what is a very hungry French defense, and they have to not get slow. I think what the Wallabies bring that is sort of exceptional beyond anything else is just the line picking. Yeah, they pick just traditionally, but also this young squad. Like you look at the likes of Paisami.
All of them are good carriers and pick great lines.
Yeah, exactly, and run off each other. And I think that is the key to breaking up this French side. It's a good defense, but they don't actually have. They haven't spent a lot of time defending teams who keep the tempo very high and stretch the full field and then hit you and then offload and then go again. Yeah. They like to defend teams that play it slow, and while we saw Australia have some purchase with the Tupou carries from short range, France's goal line D is just stellar. Their red zone D, like they're very, very stingy. If you get narrowed, they will hit you all day, and we know that with the
Six Nations.
Even the Autumn Nations Cup, and that's with the second string. So I think from a Wallaby point of view, the point of difference, obviously stretching the field, but just picking good lines, finding seams, and then keeping the tempo high. I think Gordon's going to be crucial. His service has to be crisp, because like that 9, 10, 12 spine isn't as strong as Nick White, James O'Connor, and then Paisami with Pataya outside him. It's just not, in my view. Like Lolacia's very green, Gordon is solid, but he's going to have to play very well to break up this French team. And then Tamua, for me, is like, while he has spectacular moments, he can go very cold on you, and he can start chipping the ball. If he starts sitting deep, as the leader in the team and chipping the ball away, it's a real problem. France will just eat them alive.
I think they will be looking to probe with some of those kicks. They sometimes do do very quick, high tempo sequences, but only not dissimilar to rugby league. If they go 5 or 6 phases and nothing's happened, Tamua will probably drop it on the toe and try and test that young fullback. Because that's just the way they will. They'll do it all quickly. There's less ponderousness to the way Aussies do it, but they still kind of kick the ball away a bit.
No question. And I wouldn't say they shouldn't do that either. I think the kicking game and the quality of the kicking game is massive. Like if Lolacio can pin the French back in the corners the way they've been exiting, it could be perfect. But the ones I'm talking about are when you're in a multi-phase situation and it's just everything's a little bit slow and nobody's taking it to the line and nobody's taking command of the attack and pointing guys in the right directions. And when you have a guy like Gordon, who, while decent experience, isn't the biggest personality on the field, and a young guy like Lolacio, it's on Tamua to be that guy to take a leadership role. And if he's sitting very deep and looking to put like those quirky kicks where really there's nothing on, but he's trying to just float one,
the French counter-attack.
That's the danger. Whereas I have no issue with, like, their midfield attack should be all about those first phase strike moves where they get the blindside winger like Corabetti involved, or they get Paisami involved hitting a hard line, and then they go around the corner, keep it quick. And if France shut them down, then sure, we're looking for a corner, but you got to work a smart kick. And I really think Lolacio needs to step up and be that guy as well, because one of the better qualities of his game is the pegging the ball in the corner and kicking for territory and kicking for grass into the corner is great.
Because you can pin this French side back very often, and they struggle to exit and play a little bit too much rugby in their own half, and then succumb to that pressure and seed scores, which is exactly what France will look to implement. It'll also be on the back row to contribute. Like the question is whether they can get their ruck speed up by generating it. If they're going recycling very quickly, it'll be on guys like Wilson and Hooper to take charge of that, be that through the carry or the clean out or both. Get clean serve service, good quick ball for Gordon to use, and then it remains to be seen if they can move it as well as they have been doing with their shy of their first choice halfback pairing, which is effectively what we're seeing here. But they do have a guy in Paisami at 13 who is in excellent form, and he will, like, he's kind of got free rein to run that hard line and try and sit down the French defence pretty much on his own, because there's dual distributors inside him, there's wide men outside who are exciting. He will be, whether they hit him or not, running that sit down the defence line, and he's very, very good at it.
Exactly, and if he can get ahead of steam, if he can get on top of his opposite number in Arthur Vincent, who's a very fine defender. True. It's one of the key matchups in the game, as the 13 channel always is at this level. But if he can get on top of his man, if he can sit him down on one or two carries, especially off first phase, he's just going to make life so much easier. I mean, I can picture, like, Australia like to get Corabetti involved a lot, and they should. He's their most explosive talent. But if you can use Paisami as the man off first phase and get over the gain line and keep the ball quick, then the possibilities that open up for finding Corabetti in space, for finding Tom Wright in space.
It can be a kick, it can be a pass, it can be anything but identifying that space and putting guys, and it can be Corabetti on one side, Wright on the other will take a try as well. Like there's lethal stuff on those wings, as there always is for the Wallabies, to be honest. They're really, really dangerous out wide, and Banks is rock solid in the fullback jersey as well.
He's the big boot as well, Banks.
They do value that. They be it Hodge or a thing, like they have a few other more razzle-dazzle options for counter-attack, but they kind of like a stocky, solid man who will make his tackles, will throw a good pass or put a good kick in, but is pretty much a sure thing under things like high balls and stuff, and they do have that in Banks.
Well, I mean, both sides have very similar kind of flows, and both sides do look to attack in similar ways. They'll try and break you down, they'll try and get the offload game going, they'll try and inject tempo and get your defence that way. But if there is a point of difference between these teams, it might be the smarts of this young Wallaby team in terms of just getting themselves in the right parts of the field. And Tom Banks would be a big part of that. Big part of that puzzle. Obviously, we talked about Lolosio as well, but Tom Banks putting a bomb up and maybe claiming it over the young Yamane, those are the kind of moments that could be telling in a game.
There's a lot of experience there for Australia to try and pick France apart. They will also have to be alert and alive on the defensive side, because obviously France will have their purple patches, and as much as Paisami might have a field day trying to sit down or pick apart that French defence, when he's defending, he will have his hands full as well, because France like to move the ball
and
too.
Similarly, under this under the tutelage of Galtier, they have done a lot of blindside wingers involved. It is quite Aussie in terms of their first phase attacks. Expect to see Villiers coming off his wing, and if the Wallabies aren't sharp off first phase, off set pieces, they could be cut open, as a number of teams were in the Autumn Nations Cup. I'm thinking of Villiers' try, which I think was against Italy, but just perfect set piece execution. Both sides have it in the locker.
It's true. The fear I have is actually one in my mind is just the sit down of to both Tamua and Lolosio. If a guy like Dante can run hard and occupy both of them, and then the next phase,
that's what the All Blacks
Paisami's overloaded, and then it's just you can pick apart if it's done with speed and accuracy. So there'll be a lot to do for both the centres in terms of specifically Paisami on D is who I'm thinking, but also the back row have to cover every blade of grass and make their breakdown as slow as they can, while also obviously for both sides it's a similar equation. Get your own ruck speed up, disrupt theirs at all costs, don't let them set their rhythm, because they're like, both sides are pretty irresistible if they do get clean ruck ball and a few phases to work it. They can unpick even the most experienced defences. Absolutely.
From France's point of view, obviously there's been a lot of sort of writing them off, given the fact that they don't have their main guys. But I think they should take massive encouragement, obviously, from that Autumn Nations Cup showing. In Penaud, in Villiers and Hamenei, they have absolutely lethal finishers out wide. And as you just alluded to, that sort of creating of that space in the midfield, which involves the back row guys as well, which involves Makalou getting on top, involves Jay Lange winning his battle. All of that
putting in a physical
and
he may not even touch the ball for the first 30 minutes. He'll just be smashing guys or hitting rucks.
But from an offensive point of view, if they can win some of those midfield battles and get the ball wide, I think the Kulu has to take charge here as well, because from what I've seen of Carbonell, he's not really a take control, take it to the line kind of guy, and I don't think he's Mr. 15-meter wide pass either. But Kulu can keep width on the game off the breakdown, and if you get some probing width on the game, put some lines, get some sharp lines and tight channels and some offloads that France do so well, run those support lines, then once you've broken the line, get it out wide and those guys will finish it. And that's the beautiful thing about having a back three like that, is just work it to the space, get it in their hands, and they'll score.
Yeah, usually that is the case for France. They can be so lethal if presented with gilt-edged opportunities, and in guys like Pinot, Villiers and young Jaminet, like those two wingers are all the kind of experience you'd want for a young guy as well. Like they're both lethal, they both have a few caps and know what it's like at this level, so it's a good way to chaperone them for things like the defensive duties, because we know, as we were mentioning, the Aussies will kick at them, so it'll be important to try and diffuse them. But on sweeping counter-attack, I'd have no fear, and it is just a question of whether they can control possession enough and control territory enough to generate the chances.
Yeah, because they can go toe to toe. They back themselves in a shootout purely because their defense is tigerish and has been tigerish, and they certainly it's been a massive emphasis for them. But I think back to their showing against England, when England were in the red zone and trying to bish bash bosh and they couldn't get through. And while it's encouraging from a Wallaby point of view that Super Rugby AU was more razzle dazzle, the form that the Wallabies are bringing into it is from that very sort of defensive minded, slow Tri-Nations that took place last year. And if they bring that kind of game, that kind of slow red zone offense, even with Tupou and the like, trying to bash from short range,
expect the French to repel them.
We saw them do it to England in the Nations Cup in Twickenham. We saw a B French team take on the first choice England lads and just repel them time after time after time. And that will be a huge point of confidence for them. Obviously, they're going to have to be mindful of the whole width of the field. This is a Southern Hemisphere team. You're not going to get away with some of the stuff that Six Nations teams do, where they just get in their head that they have to smash you, and then the two of them are just colliding, and nobody's looking into space. The Wallabies will be looking into space, so there's a bigger job for the outside men. But they'll be quietly confident of their defence, and they'll be confident, if it's a shootout, that they have the offensive tools to open up the Wallabies as many times as they get opened up themselves, if not more. The point of concern I have for France has to do with generating opportunities through territory and just the kicking game in general. I mean, you talked about the experience of Pinot and Villiers. Like, Villiers is great, but he's very, very short. True. So I don't love him in the air necessarily, especially against some of these AFL guys. Like Tom Wright is a very he's not an AFL guy, but he's a very classy guy in the air. Truly, Corbetty as well, very physical.
Banks rock solid as well.
And Banks rock solid as well. And Pinot, it's just not his strength. The under the high ball, he's just not great at it. Like, I've seen him make a number of errors, especially with crossfield kicks. He kind of gets lost under them. He just doesn't have a great eye for it. And Jaminet is the great unknown at fullback. He's a young 22-year-old who hasn't played yet, so it hasn't played a top 14 game, so it's hard to even gauge. But given the form that they bring into this, in terms of I don't know if they even managed 50% territory in any of their non-Italian Six Nations games.
I don't think they did. They were struggling to get out of their own half, and it was that kicking game. It was the lack of Boutier, that was their great strength in 2019, was just the phenomenal spiral boot of him, and he is on the bench, so that obviously means they are aware of it. But the kicking game of France, it'll be interesting to see if it has improved. It'll be interesting to see what these halfbacks can bring in that area to try and navigate themselves around the pitch. And then also generating good opportunities from turnover. Both of these sides are lethal from turnovers, so attacking the pill in the contact zone, that'll be the purview of both the centres, who are ferocious in that area, and the back row and the forwards alike. But then also things like the set piece. It's the Wallaby line out can be a little shaky. The Pyangamosa darts can be a little shaky. Totally. You have big athletes like Makalou and then Woki off the bench who are springy. A lot of their back row forwards are very capable in the air. So
Lange as well is good in the air. Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Like where the Wallabies might fancy it having some strength at scrum time,
having a cut at the young lad.
The
off
French
the bench,
could do the line out in, and that is as important. You lose good quality line out ball all of a sudden. Most of your set piece starter plays are out the window, and that's so crucial. And also, you can see,
as with the Pyangamosa overthrow that led to the Rico Ioane drop, that was a sure thing. Like if you're getting that set piece misfiring, and that was due to pressure that caused that overthrow, and then into the pick. Like, France are as capable as the All Blacks of going coast to coast on a turnover like that, on a break like that, the bounce of a ball, they can slot straight into their transition, straight into their attacking shape, and just take that try.
I also think an interesting area as well is if the game tightens up and gets narrow, it's going to be interesting to see if Garachi, who is huge himself, and Taufi Fanua can get on top of the Wallabies in the tight. Because as much as we touted Salakai, Loto and Phillip, there's no question that France have a bigger pair of locks.
Like heavier pack.
Taufi Fanua in particular is just a colossal unit, and he rarely goes backwards in a contact. He's really learning to throw his weight around and gets quality players to sit down. I think he sat down James Ryan at one point this year.
And to be honest, Philip is not a dissimilar shape and body, and not a dissimilar player to James Ryan himself. He works all day. He's quite robust and physical. But we did see, I think it was the All Black test that they absolutely murdered them in, but he got hauled off there at 60 minutes having been bloodied and beaten. The week after they had a very good impressive showing, they just did tape on him and hit him all day long, and he got removed eventually. And they aren't that, like, as we were talking about with this being a very quick turnaround, I think although it's a French C team, it's that's demonstrative of their depth. I think
it's not a C team like Taufi Fanua plays. It's not a C team.
No, indeed, C team is a stretch. It is a stretch. That was hyperbole for the sake of thing. Like, although it could be categorized as such for the Wallabies, they are missing a few key men, but they don't have the same depth. They're missing that halfback. They have their primary rows. I don't think they can afford for either of those two guys to go down in the row, really. I don't know how deep they go without the guys who are in Europe. Obviously, we were mentioning Skelton,
Darcy Swain covering the bench, and
he's
set to come in on debut. Good impact for them, mind you.
That's true.
In the back row. But I'd even Pesanti to come on from France. I definitely think that physicalising them and getting on top of them in those tight areas could be a decisive factor, and I think that's why I think Dave Rennie's a little paranoid about it, which is why he's trying to talk up the sort of hard hitting approach to the game, which needs to be married with technique. Let's be real. It can't just be.
Who was he touting? It's your
Lachie Swinton.
Lachie Swinton, is it?
Swinton was it? Your man who got the red card last year against the All Blacks and is currently on a red card ban.
Yeah, but he's still in the squad and was being cited as a great inspiration to them or an example to follow. Which I mean, he's Lachie Swinton. That is his name. He's a big lumbering forward. He's very, very physical. Hits very hard. Is consistently upright in the tackle though, which is a problem a lot of big rangy back rows have, and it's a recipe for a red card.
They'll have to mind it.
They will have to mind it. There's a fine line, but they'll be talking up that it's the first game of the series. It's in Suncorp. The first contact, the first collision instigated by the Wallabies will be looking to be a physical, ferocious one. That's going to be part of their game plan. So the French have to expect it, not be shocked. And if
they take it away from them, if Taufi Fanua gets on top of them, it could be a rocker of confidence.
Indeed.
So it's all interesting. Defensively, it's interesting as well. Obviously, that Edwards D we touched on is ferocious. Could be the point of difference between the two teams, or it could be, for my money, sort of is the Edwards D going to edge it, or is the Wallaby kicking game going to edge it?
Yeah.
Or is it going to become a shootout and may the best shooter win?
Indeed, if it becomes a helter-skelter, broken up one. Maybe that's reserved for Test 3, who knows?
Yeah,
but
how do you see it, Graham?
Yeah, it's tough to know. Like, obviously, this French side I have a lot of respect for. It is an unknown, young kind of talent one, development one. It's tough to know how invested they are, because the difference in a France that really want to win versus one that are ambivalent is so stark.
I'd say they're invested. They're out there. They're bubbled together. Like, I maintain this is a huge opportunity for them. It's for the individuals involved. It's a massive opportunity to stake a claim at the jersey. True. And I think this means something. I think they know that they're riding a momentum wave. They're trying to ride it through to 2023. And a bad few losses in Australia, or a bad even just a series loss, would be tough. Especially after the game last time out against Scotland when they got beaten.
They'll be looking to get back on that. It'll be back-to-back L's if they do that. Now, the fear in my head is that one that it's not the All Blacks and it's not that France team, but that tour they did of the All Blacks or of New Zealand a fair few years ago, where they just got trounced every game and were completely dialed out and just didn't seem to be involved in any of it.
In the height of the sort of the doldrums though, and I definitely think, like, the fact that the young guys who came in the Nations Cup slotted so seamlessly into the system that they had and played such a similar way and maintained that defensive pressure. Frankly, the fact that Sean Edwards is in the dressing room at all should means, I think, that
kind of precludes such a showing. Yeah, no, I don't expect. I don't anticipate anything to rival that level of dialed outedness. But I wonder if they'll be cohesive enough or be together enough to deal with the ferocity that I expect from the Wallabies from the opening whistle. I'm leaning towards a Wallaby win in Suncorp. Just that's what I'm feeling. I think if France are to win one, I think it's most likely that it's Test 2 at Amy Park in Melbourne. Just because I think that is the most statistically
likely. They do it in Suncorp. It remains true. They're just a tougher team to play in Suncorp. There's no doubt about that. That said, I do think there's weakness in that spine 9, 10 and 12. I think there's flappability from a Wallaby point of view.
Yeah.
But I can't even for colour say that I think that France will win, because I like this young Wallaby team. I think they're underrated. I think their talent is underrated and underappreciated. I think they have a lot of really classy players who could be about to explode into superstardom, like Hunter Paisami, like potentially, obviously Taniela Tupou is already there, but also potentially Harry Wilson. Like, he has all the nuts and bolts to be the best 8 in the world. I know there's a lot of similar prototypes to him out there, but he is every bit as promising as any of them, and he could be a series for him to shine. So I do think that the Wallabies, especially married with France, just having that young lad at 15, maybe they just won't be able to exit. Like, Kulu could save them, and maybe Kulu will be unreal. That could be the story.
Or Barina off the bench, who's another guy who can carry a team kicking and screaming from 9.
Yeah, but they'll score some good tries. They definitely get at least one good try, possibly 2 tries. I think it'll be Wallabies just edging it, but it'll be kind of 1-score game, and then Tupou will come on and they'll lose the scrum, and then that'll be enough. The Wallabies probably to push away.
That young young lad. Tupou towards the end. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think it will be probably a 1-score game. I'm thinking like 6 points, maybe 8 points, but I'm leaning towards 6. That being said, it could be another draw for the Wallabies growing collection of draws.
They do love a draw.
They do love an old draw. So maybe if maybe a missed kick from 55 metres for the win for the Wallabies at full time.
Reece Hodge isn't playing.
No, any of them, they always take the kick on in that circumstance, and they don't seem to get it. No, I'm leaning towards a Wallabies win, but I am expecting this to be a cracker of a test match and just a test series, condensed, as you said, over the 11-day period. We're going to touch on it in the main show as well. We'll keep abreast of it, but this is just our main series preview. I think it's going to be the best rugby over the next 11 days by far, because even though there are games like Wales, Argentina that are in theory good, but I don't think any of them will hold a candle to this. And obviously the Lions tour is in a few weeks after it, so in the meantime it's a perfect little summer curtain raiser. I think it's going to be some cracking rugby.
Awesome test series. Rugby fans everywhere tune in. And the Wales Argentina match, will cross that bridge when we come to it, but it looks like we're in store for some dialed out Argentina, mid World Cup cycle Argentina. If the weekend's evidence is anything to go by. But for this one, just going to be brilliant crack. And let us know in the comments how you think this is going to go.
Who you got?
Who do you got?
You got French flair or Aussie grit and determination?
Aussie flair.
Aussie has some flair as well.
Yeah.
I think we'll see a bit of both. We'll see some really high quality rugby from 2 really coming teams in test match rugbies, and really 2 forces for positive rugby. It's all about KBA, it's all about attack the space, it's all about hit hard as well, but just I'm expecting a really good test series between these 2.
But also, are you taking the over or under on 2 red cards in the series?
It's a good question.
They both have it in them.
They do.
But it's going to be a lot of fun. Alright guys, we will see you on Thursday, where we're going to have our main breakdown of all the rugby that's going on, including those British and Irish Lions games, obviously against the Lions and the game just gone where they won comfortably, and the game against the Sharks, which is taking place on Wednesday. We're going to watch it, then we're going to shoot the show straight after, and so we'll break down this game that's going on, we'll break down that game, and look ahead to further games on the Lions tour, as well as all of the rugby going on. So be sure to tune in on Thursday morning to that. In the meantime, I think that's us, and we'll see you then.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to give it a like, share with your friends, and leave a comment down below as well. We really do want to hear your thoughts.